The bitter wind howled across the Colorado plains as Rachel Turner clutched her threadbare shawl tighter around her swollen belly, wondering if tonight would be the night she and her unborn child would freeze to death. 8 months pregnant and without a roof over her head, she trudged through the muddy streets of Colorado City as the first snowflakes of an early winter began to fall. Rachel had been walking for hours, her swollen ankles screaming in protest, when a deep voice called out from the shadows of the mercantile porch, "Miss, you shouldn't be out in this weather, not in your condition." Rachel turned, her chestnut hair whipping across her face in the wind. A tall man stepped into the amber glow of the lantern light. His weather-beaten face spoke of long days under the merciless Colorado sun, but his eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, held nothing but concern. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice cracking with exhaustion and cold. The cowboy's gaze moved from her face to her protruding belly, and then to her mud-caked boots. He took off his hat, revealing a shock of dark hair streaked with hints of premature silver. "Name's Isaac Quinn," he said, his voice as rough as the terrain he worked. "And with all due respect, madam, you're not fine." He looked up at the darkening sky. "Storm's coming in fast. That baby needs a home tonight." Rachel felt a sob rising in her throat but swallowed it down. She'd been alone since her husband died in the mine collapse 3 months ago. Their landlord had given her 2 weeks to vacate after Robert's death. A pregnant widow can't pay rent. He'd sneered, and she'd been wandering ever since, taking odd jobs when her condition allowed. "I don't take charity," she managed, though her body betrayed her as she swayed slightly on her feet. Isaac stepped forward, not touching her but close enough that she could smell leather and horses and something distinctly masculine. "Not offering charity, madam. Offering shelter. Got a ranch about 2 miles out. Nothing fancy, but it's warm, and my housekeeper, Mrs. Bridges, makes a stew that could bring a man back from the dead." A sharp pain lanced through Rachel's lower back, and she gasped. Isaac's eyes widened with alarm. "That's it," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "You're coming with me." He whistled, and a magnificent palomino trotted around from behind the mercantile. "This is Thunder. He's gentle as a kitten despite his size." Before she could protest, Isaac had helped her onto the horse and mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist as they set off into the gathering darkness. Rachel Turner had sworn never to depend on a man again after Robert's death left her destitute. But as the lights of Isaac Quinn's ranch house came into view through the thickening snow, she found herself thanking whatever God might still be watching over her. Little did she know that crossing Isaac Quinn's path would change both their lives forever in ways neither could have imagined on that cold Colorado evening in 1879. The ranch house loomed before them, a sturdy 2-story structure built from pine and river rock. Warm light glowed from the windows, a beacon in the growing storm. Rachel felt her baby kick vigorously as they approached, as if the child too sensed they were nearing sanctuary. Isaac dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent more time on horseback than on foot. He reached up to help Rachel down, his strong hand spanning her waist. "Careful now," he murmured as her feet touched the ground. The front door swung open before they reached it, and a plump woman with silver-streaked black hair hurried onto the porch. "Isaac Quinn." What in heaven's name? The woman's eyes fell on Rachel, widening as she took in the young woman's condition. "Lord have mercy. Mrs. Bridges, this is Miss Turner," Rachel supplied. "Rachel Turner. Miss Turner needs shelter for the night, maybe longer." Mrs. Bridges's face softened. "Of course she does. Come in, child, before you catch your death." The house was warm, blessedly so. Rachel felt the sting of returning circulation in her frozen fingers as Mrs. Bridges ushered her toward the stone fireplace in the large front room. "Sit, sit," the older woman clucked, pulling a rocking chair closer to the fire. "I'll fetch some tea and start warming supper." Isaac hung his hat and coat on pegs near the door. Without the bulky outerwear, Rachel could see he was lean but muscular, his shoulders broad beneath a faded blue shirt. He caught her looking and gave a brief, almost shy smile that transformed his rugged features. "Sorry about the state of things," he said, gesturing vaguely around the room. "Not much for decorating." The room was sparsely furnished but clean: a leather sofa, a few chairs, a bearskin rug before the fireplace. Bookshelves lined one wall, surprisingly well stocked. "It's wonderful," Rachel said sincerely. After weeks of sleeping in barns and on her luckiest nights, the back rooms of sympathetic shopkeepers, the modest ranch house seemed like a palace. "You a reader?" Isaac asked, noting her gaze on the books. "When I can. My father was a schoolteacher back in Pennsylvania." Isaac nodded. "My mother taught me to read before I could ride. Dad thought it was a waste of time for a rancher, but—" he shrugged. "Some habits stick." Mrs. Bridges returned with a steaming mug of tea and a quilt, which she tucked around Rachel's legs. "Supper in 20 minutes. Isaac, make yourself useful and bring in more firewood." When he'd gone outside, Mrs. Bridges sat on the edge of the sofa. "Now then, Mrs. Turner, miss," Rachel corrected reflexively, then bit her lip. "My husband died 3 months ago." The housekeeper's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm sorry, child. How far along are you?" 8 months, give or take a week." Mrs. Bridges nodded sagely. "Have you seen a doctor?" Rachel shook her head. "Not since Robert died. No money." "Well, we'll have to fix that." "Doc Wilson comes by every other Friday to check on Mr. Quinn's bad shoulder, old injury from the war. He'll be here tomorrow." The door opened, bringing a blast of cold air as Isaac returned with an armload of logs. He stacked them neatly by the fireplace, then stoked the fire until it roared. "Storm's picking up," he reported. "Good thing we got back when we did." During supper, a hearty beef stew with fresh bread that made Rachel nearly weep with gratitude, Isaac explained his situation. "Ranch belonged to my uncle. He died last spring, left it to me. Been trying to build it up since. Got about 60 head of cattle, dozen horses." He looked down at his bowl. "It's hard work, but honest." "Mr. Quinn served in the war," Mrs. Bridges added. "Cavalry." Isaac shifted uncomfortably. "That was a lifetime ago." "Union?" Rachel asked. He nodded. "Pennsylvania 3rd Cavalry." "You said you're from Pennsylvania." "Harrisburg. My father's school was there." "I know it. Passed through during the war." They fell into comfortable conversation, carefully avoiding the difficult subjects of her homelessness and his apparent solitude. After supper, Mrs. Bridges showed Rachel to a bedroom upstairs. "Was my sister's room when she visited," Isaac explained from the doorway. "She's in Denver now with her husband." The room was simple but comfortable, with a brass bed covered in a colorful quilt and lace curtains at the window. A wooden rocking chair sat in the corner. "Thank you," Rachel said, sudden tears pricking her eyes. "I don't know how I'll repay your kindness." Isaac shook his head. "No need. Get some rest, Miss Turner. We'll talk more tomorrow." That night, as the storm raged outside, Rachel lay in the first real bed she'd had in weeks, feeling her baby move beneath her hands. "We're safe tonight, little one," she whispered. "We're safe." Down the hall, Isaac Quinn stared out his bedroom window at the swirling snow, thinking of the beautiful, proud woman sleeping under his roof, and wondering what twist of fate had brought her to his door and what it might mean for his future. Morning came with brilliant sunshine that turned the snow-covered landscape into a dazzling white expanse. Rachel awoke to the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up the stairs. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she was back in the little cabin she'd shared with Robert. Then reality returned, and with it the memory of the kind cowboy who'd rescued her from the storm. She dressed quickly in her only spare dress, faded calico that strained across her belly, and made her way downstairs. In the kitchen, she found Mrs. Bridges at the stove and Isaac at the table reading a newspaper. He stood when she entered, a gesture of politeness she hadn't experienced in months. "Morning," he said. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in a long time," Rachel admitted. "Thank you, Mrs. Bridges set a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits before her. "Eat up, child. You're feeding too." As they ate, Isaac cleared his throat. "Miss Turner, I've been thinking. Mrs. Bridges could use some help around the house, what with her arthritis acting up in the cold weather. If you'd be willing to stay on a while, help with cooking and such, there's pay in it. Not much, but enough, and you'd have room and board." Rachel paused, fork halfway to her mouth. It was charity thinly disguised, but her options were non-existent. Her baby would arrive soon, and she had nowhere else to go. That's very generous." "Not generous," Isaac countered. "Practical. Mrs. Bridges has been after me to hire help, and you need a place to stay. Makes sense to me." Mrs. Bridges made a noise that might have been agreement or amusement. "Lord knows this place could use a woman's touch beyond what these old hands can manage." Before Rachel could respond, a knock came at the front door. Isaac rose to answer it, returning moments later with a stout, bearded man carrying a leather medical bag. "Miss Turner, this is Doc Wilson." "Doc, this is Rachel Turner." The doctor's kind eyes assessed her condition immediately. "Mrs. Bridges filled me in. Let's have a look at you and that baby, shall we?" After a thorough examination in the privacy of her bedroom, Doc Wilson declared both mother and child to be in surprisingly good health given the circumstances. "Baby's positioned right, heartbeat strong. You're made of stern stuff, young lady." He packed his stethoscope away. "But you need rest, good food, and no more sleeping rough. That child's coming in a few weeks, and you need your strength." When the doctor had gone, Rachel found Isaac in the barn, brushing down thunder. He looked up as she entered, snowmelt dripping from her boots onto the straw-covered floor. "I'll take the job," she said without preamble, "if it's still offered." Isaac nodded, something like relief crossing his features. "Good. That's good. But I want to be clear, this is temporary. Once the baby comes and I'm back on my feet, I'll find my own way." A shadow passed across Isaac's face, but he nodded again. "Fair enough. Start whenever you're ready." The following days fell into a rhythm. Rachel helped Mrs. Bridges with household tasks, cooking, mending, simple cleaning that didn't require heavy lifting. Isaac was often out on the ranch, checking cattle, mending fences, and preparing for the coming winter. At night, they gathered in the front room. Sometimes Isaac read aloud from one of his books. Twain was a favorite while Rachel and Mrs. Bridges sewed or knitted. Sometimes they just talked, learning each other's stories in small, careful pieces. Rachel learned that Isaac had been engaged before the war, but returned to find his fiancée married to another man. He'd wandered west afterward, working ranches from Texas to Montana, before settling in Colorado when his uncle fell ill. "Never found another woman who'd put up with me," he said with a self-deprecating smile that didn't reach his eyes. In turn, she told him about meeting Robert Turner at a church social, their hasty marriage when her father objected to the match, and their journey west in search of fortune in the silver mines. "Robert was a dreamer," she explained, "always chasing the next big strike." "And you?" Isaac asked. "What were you chasing?" Rachel considered the question. "A home, I suppose. Somewhere to belong." Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of a shared loneliness. December arrived with more snow and biting winds. Rachel's time grew closer, her belly so large now that she could barely see her feet. Isaac insisted on having Doc Wilson check on her weekly, paying the man from his own pocket despite Rachel's protests. One evening, as Mrs. Bridges retired early with a headache, Rachel and Isaac found themselves alone in the front room. The fire crackled cheerfully, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Can I ask you something personal?" Isaac said suddenly, setting aside his book. Rachel nodded, though wariness crept into her heart. "The baby's father, your husband, was it a good marriage?" The question startled her. "Yes," she said automatically, then hesitated. "At least I thought so. Robert was restless, never satisfied with what we had, but he was kind in his way. Did you love him?" "I did." Rachel's hand stilled on the baby blanket she was crocheting. "But sometimes I wonder if I loved the idea of him more than the man himself. Is that terrible to say?" Isaac shook his head. "Honest, not terrible." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Rachel gasped and pressed a hand to her side. Isaac was immediately alert. "What is it? Should I fetch the doctor?" "No, no," Rachel laughed. "The baby's just very active tonight. Here." Without thinking, she reached for his hand and placed it on her belly. Isaac's eyes widened as the baby kicked against his palm. A look of wonder transformed his face, softening the hard edges earned from years of sun and struggle. "That's amazing," he whispered. Rachel became acutely aware of the warmth of his hand through her dress, of the smallness of the space between them on the sofa, of the way his eyes, blue as a summer sky, met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. He must have felt it too, for he slowly withdrew his hand and cleared his throat. "Getting late. You should rest." That night, Rachel lay awake long after she should have been asleep, thinking of the gentle cowboy down the hall and wondering why her heart raced at the memory of his touch. The first labor pains began 3 days later as Rachel was helping Mrs. Bridges prepare breakfast. A sharp cramp seized her lower back, forcing her to grip the edge of the table. Mrs. Bridges noticed immediately. "Is it time?" Rachel nodded, unable to speak as another contraction rippled through her. The older woman moved with surprising speed for someone with arthritic knees. "Isaac," she called. "Fetch Doc Wilson. The baby's coming." Isaac burst into the kitchen, his face pale beneath his tan. "Now. It's coming now." "Babies don't wait for convenient timing," Mrs. Bridges said dryly. "Help me get her upstairs, then ride for the doctor." By the time Isaac returned with Doc Wilson, Rachel's labor had progressed rapidly. The doctor examined her and nodded grimly. "This baby's in a hurry to meet the world. Won't be long now." Isaac paced outside Rachel's door, wincing at each muffled cry from within. The women had shooed him away. Men are useless at birthing, Mrs. Bridges had declared, but he couldn't bring himself to leave the hallway. As the hours passed, the cries grew more frequent, more intense. Then suddenly, a different sound pierced the air, the unmistakable wail of a newborn baby. Isaac froze, his heart hammering. The door opened and Doc Wilson emerged, wiping his hands on a towel. "Congratulations," the doctor said with a tired smile. "Mother and son are doing just fine." "Son," Isaac repeated. "A boy, healthy as a horse, though arrived a bit earlier than expected. You can go in now if you like." Isaac hesitated, suddenly unsure of his place. He wasn't family, he was just, what, a landlord, an employer, a friend. But his feet carried him forward anyway, into the room where Rachel sat propped against pillows, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. Her face was flushed, her hair damp with sweat, but she wore an expression of such profound joy that it took Isaac's breath away. "Isaac," she said softly, "come meet Robert James Turner. He approached the bed cautiously, peering down at the red-faced infant wrapped in a blanket he recognized as one Rachel had been sewing. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a determined little chin. "He's perfect," Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. "Would you like to hold him?" Before he could protest, Rachel was placing the tiny bundle in his arms. Isaac had handled newborn calves and foals, but never a human baby. The child was impossibly light, impossibly fragile in his weathered hands. Little Robert opened his eyes deep blue, as all newborns are, and seemed to look directly at Isaac. Something shifted in the cowboy's chest, a seismic realignment of his world around this tiny person who wasn't his but somehow, in that moment, felt like he could be. "Hello, little man," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." Rachel watched them, her heart so full it might burst. This man, this kind, honorable man who'd taken in a desperate stranger, was looking at her son as if he were the most precious thing in the world. And in that moment, something changed between them. Something neither was ready to name but both felt with absolute certainty. The winter deepened, and little Robert, or RJ, as Isaac had taken to calling him, thrived. Rachel recovered quickly from the birth, determined to earn her keep despite Isaac's insistence that she rest. "I've imposed on your kindness long enough," she said one morning as she served breakfast, RJ sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle Isaac had constructed from an old apple crate. "You're not imposing," Isaac replied, his tone sharper than intended. "You're working, remember, and doing a damn fine job of it." Mrs. Bridges raised an eyebrow at his language but said nothing, continuing to knit the tiny socks she'd been making by the dozen since RJ's arrival. "Still," Rachel persisted, "I need to think about the future. I can't stay here forever." Isaac set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. "Why not?" The question hung in the air between them. Mrs. Bridges suddenly remembered urgent business in the pantry, leaving them alone. "Isaac," Rachel began, uncertain how to proceed, "you've been more than generous, but this isn't my home. I need to find my own way for RJ's sake. And if I said I want it to be your home—" Isaac's voice was low, his eyes intent on hers. "Yours and RJ's," Rachel's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Isaac stood, raking a hand through his hair. "I'm saying I've grown fond of having you here, both of you." He gestured toward the sleeping baby. "The ranch is coming along. I've been saving to expand in the spring, maybe add some sheep. It's a good life, Rachel. Could be better shared. Are you offering me a permanent position as your housekeeper?" she asked carefully. "No." He took a step toward her. "Though I reckon I'm making a mess of this, I'm offering." He faltered, then squared his shoulders like a man facing a firing squad. "I'm offering myself, if you'll have me, as a husband, a father to RJ." Rachel stared at him, her heart pounding. "Isaac, we barely know each other. I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met. I know you make the best apple pie west of the Mississippi. I know you hum when you think no one's listening, and you've got more pride than sense sometimes." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "I know I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. And what way is that?" Instead of answering with words, Isaac closed the distance between them and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when Rachel didn't pull away, it deepened into something that sent warmth coursing through her veins. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "That way," he murmured. Rachel's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. She couldn't deny the attraction she felt for Isaac. It had been building steadily since that first night, but marriage so soon after Robert. And what if this was just gratitude or convenience on Isaac's part? "I need time," she whispered, "to think." Isaac nodded, stepping back. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." The day after Isaac's unexpected proposal, a visitor arrived at the ranch. Rachel was hanging laundry on the porch, taking advantage of a rare sunny day when a buggy pulled up in the yard. A well-dressed woman stepped down, looking around with obvious disdain. She was perhaps 40, with sharp features and expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the rustic setting. "Can I help you?" Rachel called, balancing RJ on her hip, the woman's gaze fixed on her, then on the baby. Something like disgust flashed across her face. "I'm looking for Isaac Quinn," she said coldly. "I was told this is his ranch." Before Rachel could answer, Isaac emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He stopped short when he saw the visitor. "Irene," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "this is unexpected, clearly." The woman Irene looked pointedly at Rachel and RJ. "I see you've been busy since I last wrote." An uncomfortable silence fell. Rachel felt suddenly conscious of her simple dress and work-roughened hands. "Rachel," Isaac said finally, "this is Irene Prescott, my former fiancée." Understanding dawned. This was the woman who had abandoned Isaac when he returned from the war. "Mrs. Prescott," Rachel acknowledged with a nod. "Miss Prescott now," Irene corrected. "My husband passed last year." She turned to Isaac. "Might we speak privately?" Isaac hesitated, glancing at Rachel. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of Rachel." Irene's mouth tightened. "Very well. I've come to make amends, Isaac. After William died, I had a lot of time to think about my choices. I was wrong to marry him when you were away fighting. I was young and afraid, and he offered security." "That was 15 years ago," Isaac said flatly. "Yes, and I've regretted it for 15 years. Irene took a step toward him. "I'm free now. We could start again." Rachel felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Of course a woman like Irene would want Isaac back. He was kind, hardworking, handsome in his rugged way. And they had history, a connection that predated Rachel's arrival by many years. "I should take RJ inside," she murmured, turning toward the door. "Stay," Isaac said, his tone brooking no argument. He faced Irene. "I appreciate you coming all this way, but my answer is no. Whatever we had is long past." Irene's expression hardened. "Because of her?" She jerked her head toward Rachel. "Really, Isaac, you can do better than someone else's leavings." Isaac's face darkened with anger. "That's enough. Rachel is twice the woman you ever were, Irene. And that leavings you're referring to is an innocent child who I'd be proud to call my son." Shock registered on Irene's face, followed quickly by calculation. "You've proposed to her," she realized. How convenient for her, finding a man desperate enough to take on another man's child. Rachel flinched as if struck. RJ began to cry, sensing her distress. "Get back in your buggy and leave," Isaac said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Now." For a moment, it seemed Irene might argue, but something in Isaac's expression changed her mind. With a last contemptuous look at Rachel, she climbed back into her buggy and snapped the reins. As the buggy disappeared down the lane, Rachel found her voice. "I should go inside." "Rachel, wait." Isaac caught her arm gently. "What she said, none of that is true. You know that, right?" Tears burned behind Rachel's eyes. "Isn't it? You proposed to me out of kindness, Isaac." "Because I was here and convenient and you felt sorry for us." "No." His denial was vehement. "I proposed because I'm falling in love with you, because I can't imagine my life without you and RJ in it anymore." His blue eyes searched hers. "Do you believe me?" Rachel wanted to desperately, but Irene's visit had awakened all her insecurities. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered, and fled into the house. That night, after RJ was asleep and the house quiet, Rachel sat in the rocking chair by her window, watching snowflakes drift past in the moonlight. A soft knock came at her door. "Rachel," Isaac's voice was muffled through the wood. "Can we talk?" She considered refusing but knew they couldn't avoid this conversation forever. "Come in." He entered, closing the door quietly behind him. He changed from his work clothes into clean trousers and a button-down shirt, his hair still damp from washing. "I owe you an explanation about Irene," he began, standing awkwardly in the center of the room. "You don't owe me anything," Rachel said. "I do." He sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped between his knees. "Irene and I grew up together in Pennsylvania, sweethearts since we were 16. I proposed before I left for the war and she promised to wait." A bitter smile crossed his face. "6 months later, I got a letter saying she'd married William Prescott, the banker's son. He had flat feet, couldn't serve." "I'm sorry," Isaac shrugged. "It nearly broke me at the time. When I came home in '65, I couldn't stand to stay in that town, watching them build a life together. So I headed west, worked my way through every territory, never staying long." He looked up at her. "Until Uncle Frank got sick and I came here. For the first time in years, I felt like I might have found a place to belong. And then I showed up with all my problems," Rachel said softly. "And then you showed up," Isaac agreed. "And suddenly the ranch wasn't just a place anymore. It was home." He reached across the space between them to take her hand. "What I'm trying to say badly is that I didn't propose out of pity or convenience. I proposed because meeting you and RJ made me realize what I've been missing all these years. A family." Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "What if you change your mind? What if you decide a ready-made family isn't what you wanted after all?" "I won't." His grip on her hand tightened. "But I understand your caution, so here's what I propose: we take our time, get to know each other better. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, my offer stands." The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. Rachel found herself nodding. "I'd like that." Relief washed over Isaac's features. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you." As January gave way to February, life at the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Isaac threw himself into preparations for spring calving, often coming in late for supper, exhausted but satisfied with the day's work. Rachel managed the household, caring for RJ and helping Mrs. Bridges keep everything running smoothly. In the evenings, they would sit together after Mrs. Bridges retired, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying each other's presence. Gradually, tentatively, they grew closer. A touch here, a lingering look there, occasional kisses that left them both wanting more but respecting the boundaries Rachel had set. One bright February morning, Isaac announced at breakfast, "Need to ride into town for supplies. Thought you and RJ might like to come along." Rachel hesitated. She hadn't left the ranch since arriving in December, partly due to the winter weather and partly from fear of facing the townspeople's judgment. An unmarried mother living under a bachelor's roof was bound to cause gossip. Seeing her hesitation, Isaac added, "Doc Wilson's been asking after RJ. And Mrs. Wilson invited us for lunch." Mrs. Bridges nudged Rachel. "Go on, child. The fresh air will do you good, and that baby needs to see something besides these four walls." So it was decided. They bundled up against the cold, RJ wrapped in layers of blankets and tucked securely in Rachel's arms. Isaac helped them into the wagon he'd prepared, complete with extra blankets and heated bricks for their feet. As they drove toward town, the winter landscape sparkled around them, ice crystals hanging from tree branches like diamonds. Rachel found herself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasure of being out in the world again. "It's beautiful," she said, drinking in the view of snow-covered mountains in the distance. Isaac glanced at her, his expression soft. "Yes, it is." In town, they drew curious looks as Isaac helped Rachel and RJ down from the wagon in front of the general store. He kept a protective hand at the small of her back as they entered, a gesture not lost on the store owner or the other customers. "Mr. Quinn," the shopkeeper greeted them. "Been a while. And who might these folks be?" "Ben, this is Rachel Turner and her son, Robert James." Isaac's tone was casual but held a note of challenge, as if daring anyone to comment negatively. To Rachel's relief, the shopkeeper simply smiled and tipped his hat. "Madam, fine-looking boy you have there." As Isaac gathered his supplies, Rachel browsed the store's limited selection of fabric, thinking she might make new curtains for the kitchen. She was examining a bolt of cheerful yellow calico when she overheard two women whispering nearby. "Living in sin, I heard. Baby can't be his. The timing's all wrong. Always thought Isaac Quinn would have better sense." Heat flooded Rachel's face. She set the fabric down and turned to find Isaac standing behind her, his expression thunderous. He'd clearly heard the gossip too. "Isaac," she began quietly. "Perhaps we should, ladies," he interrupted, addressing the gossiping women directly. "If you have questions about my household arrangements, I'd be happy to answer them directly rather than have you spreading falsehoods." The women had the grace to look embarrassed. One of them, a thin woman with pinched features, lifted her chin defiantly. "We're just concerned for your reputation, Mr. Quinn. Taking in a woman in her condition, well, people talk." "Let them talk," Isaac replied coldly. "Miss Turner is under my protection and her son with her. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." He placed the bolt of yellow fabric Rachel had been admiring on the counter. "We'll take 10 yards of this, Ben, and whatever else the lady wants." Outside the store, Rachel finally found her voice. "You shouldn't have done that. Now they'll talk even more." Isaac's jaw was set stubbornly. "I don't care. I won't have them disrespecting you. It's sweet of you to defend me, but no buts." He took her hand right there on the main street of Colorado City. "Let them talk." "I'm not ashamed of how I feel about you, Rachel." Before she could respond, a familiar voice called out, "Isaac Quinn, as I live and breathe." They turned to see Doc Wilson and his wife approaching, both smiling broadly. "And this must be little Robert, Mrs." Wilson exclaimed, peering at the bundle in Rachel's arms. "Oh, he's beautiful." The doctor's wife was a plump, cheerful woman with kind eyes and an infectious laugh. She insisted they come for lunch immediately, brushing aside Rachel's protests about imposing. The Wilsons' home was cozy and welcoming. Over a meal of beef stew and freshly baked bread, conversation flowed easily. No one mentioned Rachel's unmarried state or questioned her presence in Isaac's home. Instead, Mrs. Wilson, "Call me Margaret, dear," regaled them with town gossip and stories of her husband's more amusing patients. "Daniel Perkins came in last week convinced he was dying," she chuckled. "Turned out he'd just eaten too many of his wife's pickled beets." As they laughed together, Rachel felt something she hadn't experienced since before Robert's death: normalcy. The simple pleasure of sharing a meal with friends, of being treated as a person worthy of respect rather than an object of pity or scorn. On the ride back to the ranch, Rachel was unusually quiet, processing the day's events. The town's judgment had been expected, but Isaac's fierce defense and the Wilsons' warm acceptance had taken her by surprise. "Penny for your thoughts," Isaac said as the ranch came into view. Rachel smiled. "I was just thinking how lucky RJ and I are to have found you." Isaac's answering smile warmed her more than all the blankets and heated bricks combined. That night, after RJ was fed and sleeping peacefully, Rachel found Isaac on the front porch, smoking his pipe and watching the stars. She sat beside him on the wooden bench, drawing her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "Thank you for today," she said. "For everything." Isaac tapped out his pipe. "You don't need to thank me. I do." She turned to face him fully. You've given us so much: a home, protection, your good name in town, and I've been holding back, afraid to trust what's happening between us. Rachel, let me finish. She took a deep breath. When Robert died, I thought my chance at happiness died with him. I was alone, pregnant, terrified. Then you found me, and gradually, day by day, you showed me that maybe there could be a second chance. Her voice trembled slightly. I think I'm ready to take it. Isaac's eyes widened. Are you saying? I'm saying yes, Rachel whispered. Yes to your proposal if it still stands. For a moment, Isaac sat perfectly still. Then, with a whoop that probably startled the cattle in the far pasture, he pulled Rachel into his arms, lifting her clear off the ground and spinning her in a circle. Isaac Quinn, she laughed. Put me down before you wake the baby. He set her on her feet but kept his arms around her waist. You're sure? He asked, suddenly serious. I don't want you agreeing because you feel obligated, or Rachel silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her newfound certainty into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she smiled up at him. I'm sure. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the Wilsons' front parlor, with Doc Wilson giving away the bride and Margaret serving as matron of honor. Mrs. Bridges held RJ throughout the ceremony, tears streaming unashamedly down her weathered cheeks. Rachel wore a simple dress of deep blue that Isaac had insisted on buying from the dressmaker in town, despite her protests about the expense. My bride deserves a proper wedding dress, he declared, and the look of awe on his face when he saw her in it made every penny worthwhile. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Isaac kissed her with such tender passion that Doc Wilson cleared his throat pointedly, causing everyone to laugh. A small reception followed, with neighbors and a few of Isaac's ranching friends in attendance. To Rachel's surprise, even the gossiping women from the general store appeared, bearing gifts and apparently determined to be on the right side of the new Mrs. Quinn. As the sun set on their wedding day, Isaac and Rachel stood on the porch of their ranch house, their home, watching their guests depart. Happy, Mrs. Quinn? Isaac asked, his arm around her waist. Rachel leaned into him, contentment washing over her. More than I ever thought possible. Mrs. Bridges had insisted on keeping RJ for the night, giving the newlyweds privacy in a gesture both embarrassing and deeply appreciated. As Isaac carried Rachel over the threshold of their bedroom, now theirs, truly shared nervousness fluttered in her stomach. We don't have to rush anything, Isaac said softly, setting her gently on her feet. I know it hasn't been that long since you had RJ. Rachel touched his face, moved by his consideration. I'm fully healed, she assured him. Doc Wilson confirmed it last week. Still, Isaac took his time, undressing her with reverent hands, his eyes darkening as each layer fell away. His touch was gentle, exploring, as if memorizing every curve and freckle. When at last they came together as husband and wife, Rachel found herself overwhelmed by the rightness of it, by the tender passion between them. Afterward, lying in Isaac's arms, Rachel thought about the journey that had brought her here, the loss, the fear, the desperate night when a kind cowboy had offered shelter to a homeless pregnant woman. What are you thinking? Isaac murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. I'm thinking about fate, she answered, about how the worst day of my life led me to the best. Isaac pressed a kiss to her forehead. I thank God every day that I found you, even if the circumstances were difficult. You think we would have found each other anyway? In another life, another time. Yes, he said without hesitation. Some people are meant to be together, Rachel. I believe that with all my heart. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers and the plaintive bawling of newborn calves. The ranch thrived under Isaac's careful management, and Rachel settled fully into her role as wife, mother and mistress of the Quinn household. RJ grew rapidly, a sturdy, cheerful baby with his mother's chestnut hair and a smile that could melt the hardest heart. Isaac doted on him shamelessly, carrying him around the ranch on his shoulders, showing him the horses and cattle with the patience of a born teacher. "He's not even walking yet," Rachel laughed one day as Isaac attempted to show 6-month-old RJ how to groom a pony. "I think ranching lessons can wait a year or two." "Never too early to learn," Isaac insisted, guiding RJ's tiny hand over the pony's velvety nose. "Besides, Thunder here is the gentlest horse on the place, perfect for a boy's first mount." The love between Isaac and RJ grew as naturally as the spring grass. Though not related by blood, they shared a bond that transcended biology, a bond of chosen family, of love freely given and joyfully received. One warm evening in May, as they sat on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, Rachel rested her head on Isaac's shoulder. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice vibrating with suppressed excitement. Isaac turned to look at her, eyebrows raised in question. "I saw Doc Wilson today when I was in town." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have another baby." Joy bloomed across Isaac's face, followed quickly by concern. "Are you feeling all right?" "Is it too soon after, RJ?" Rachel laughed. "I'm fine. The baby's fine. Doc says I'm as healthy as a horse." Isaac gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of precious glass. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," she replied, marveling at how easily the words came now, how true they felt in her heart. Their second child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Bridges Quinn, was born on a crisp December morning, exactly 1 year after Rachel and Isaac had first met. She had her father's startling blue eyes and a lusty cry that announced her arrival to the entire ranch. As Rachel watched Isaac hold their daughter for the first time, RJ balanced on his knee to peer curiously at his new sister. She felt a sense of completion, of rightness. This was her family, not the one she'd imagined as a young bride, but the one she'd been destined to find through hardship and grace. Mrs. Bridges, now officially granny to both children, declared little Elizabeth the most perfect baby she'd ever seen. "After RJ, of course," she hastily added. The years that followed brought more children, twin boys, Samuel and Joseph, in 1883, and another daughter, Grace, in 1886. The Quinn Ranch expanded with each new addition to the family, prospering under Isaac's shrewd management and Rachel's careful stewardship. RJ grew into a thoughtful, responsible young man who shared his stepfather's love of the land and his mother's quick intelligence. Though he knew the story of his birth father, Rachel and Isaac had agreed never to hide it from him, he considered Isaac his true father in every way that mattered. "Blood makes relatives," Isaac often said. "Love makes family." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Rachel with a gold locket containing miniature portraits of all 5 children. As he fastened it around her neck, he whispered, "Thank you for saying yes." Rachel turned in his arms, pressing her palm to his weathered cheek. "Thank you for asking that night, for seeing a woman in need and offering not just shelter but a future." Isaac's eyes, still as blue as the day they'd met, crinkled at the corners. "Best decision I ever made." As they stood together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard below, RJ teaching the twins to rope a fence post, Elizabeth and Grace making daisy chains in the grass, Rachel thought about how far they'd come from that snowy night in Colorado City. She had been desperate, alone, afraid for her unborn child's future. Isaac had been solitary, wounded by past rejection, guarding his heart behind walls built of disappointment and loss. Together they had healed each other, building a life rich with love, laughter, and the sweet chaos of family. That baby needed a home tonight, Isaac had said all those years ago, not knowing he was offering not just shelter for a night, but a lifetime of love. Looking at their thriving ranch, their beautiful children, and the man who had become her heart's true home, Rachel knew they had both found exactly what they needed each other. And as the Colorado sunset painted the sky in shades of promise, Isaac pulled her close for a kiss that held all the tenderness of their beginning and all the certainty of their future together, a future neither could have imagined on that cold winter night when a homeless pregnant woman and a lonely cowboy found in each other the missing pieces of their hearts.